It also brought hemp seeds. 100 years later, the first drafts of the American Constitution were written on hemp paper. The same paper was used in 1776 for the Declaration of Independence.
Cannabis seeds were now also brought into America by the African slaves.
Messieurs, voici un jeune homme en bonne santé, fort robuste, excellent travailleur.
400 piastres.
500 piastres.
600 piastres.
The Africans were captured in their own country to be used as slaves in America. They arrived without clothes and were given rough hemp clothes to wear. That was a traditional prison uniform. Western countries rediscovered cannabis, or at least its psychotropic properties, which had been hidden from people for centuries, during the expansion of their empires, which also introduced them to other cultural influences. The English rediscovered cannabis in India, and the French did the same in North Africa. When Bonaparte launched his Egyptian campaign, the soldiers brought back home many souvenirs, including hashish. The modern history of hashish in France goes back to Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. Bonaparte was almost assassinated by an Egyptian who had taken hashish. That's how our relation with cannabis started, because straight away Napoleon banned cannabis in Egypt. For a long time, there has been this theory in France, you can still hear it sometimes said, that the word assassin is derived etymologically from the word hashishin. But if you look closely at this theory, this is not a true derivation. Nevertheless, it has been used to discredit cannabis. What is interesting is that you can find the idea again behind the climbing myth. The West has often made such mental contortions in order to prove the real danger of cannabis.
England has been using hemp as a strategic material for centuries. At the beginning of the 19th century, ropes and sails for ships were exclusively made from hemp, but 90% of this hemp was imported from Italy and Russia. The United Kingdom was seriously worried about maintaining its hemp supplies during the expansion of the Napoleonic Empire. King George III of England decided to increase the cultivation of hemp and to develop its production in the seaports along the south coast of Britain.
Now, Bridport is a most remarkable seaport. It has been making, growing, manufacturing hemp, flax, sailcloth, ropes, twines, nets of every conceivable description since time out of mind. And I use the phrase time out of mind because it was used in a charter by King John of 1213, where he wrote to the burgesses of Bridport and exhorted them night and day to make cables and ropes of every description. There were frequent wars with France, certainly from early medieval times, until, of course, Napoleonic Wars. And Bridport took part in that span of history.
In 1803, the British Navy organised a blockade against France. Napoleon counteracted by signing an agreement with the Tsar Alexander I. This contract was called the Tilsit Treaty, and it especially forbade any export of hemp to England and America, thereby depriving them both of the use of hemp towards their sailcloth, rope, and other hemp product used in the war effort. Despite Napoleon's protests, Alexander I allowed merchants to smuggle hemp to Britain. This is one of the reasons why Napoleon decided to invade Russia. But the severe early winter of 1812 forced him to withdraw his troops and led to the end of his empire.
In the early 19th century, in Europe, the mysterious East became the latest rage, as did cannabis smoking. The Oriental wave influenced styles of interior decoration, clothing, and travel abroad. To be in fashion, people smoked hashish with the traditional water pipe and discovered its potent effects on lovemaking. In Paris, the famous Assassin Club was located at Hotel Pimodon. Artists and writers came here to eat Dr. Joseph Moreau de Tours' famous jam, which incorporated hashish. Among them were Théophile Gautier, Eugène Delacroix, Charles Baudelaire, Alexandre Dumas, Gérard de Nerval. Queen Victoria also used hashish. She used tincture of cannabis, a popular method for alleviating period pains. She was also prescribed morphine or laudanum, another popular remedy for many complaints.
In Amsterdam, cannabis, which had been imported from the Dutch colonies of South Africa since 1660, was smoked in coffee shops, a tradition that has survived until present day.
At the end of the 19th century, Indian migrants brought cannabis into Mexico, where it was named marihuana, and then became the symbol of Pancho Villa's rebellion with the song La Cucaracha.
Mexican first prepared the fibers. They made every kind of product, from hats to bags and carpets.
Marijuana traveled from Mexico to the southern states of America. Black people working in the cotton plantations smoked it to try and soften their harsh lives, which were aggravated by the economic aftermath of the Civil War. Marijuana fever hit the suburbs of Louisville through Dixieland jazz and swing. Marijuana was known in America as reefer or grass. Within a few years, reefer songs spread widely from the music clubs, which had appeared everywhere where the immigrant black communities settled.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man?
Along with new developments in the hemp industry and a growing awareness of the dangers of alcohol, marijuana began to be the subject of interest in the corridors of political power.
In 1911, New Orleans and then Louisiana and Mississippi and a couple of states along the Mississippi River outlawed marijuana.
Meanwhile, alcohol was increasingly being seen as a danger to society. American women lobbied for alcohol to be banned. This succeeded with prohibition, which led to illegal speakeasies, the proceeds of which enriched criminals and resulted in violence and gang warfare. Alcohol was legalized again in 1933.
Then all of a sudden alcohol was becoming legal again, and all these agents didn't have anything to do, and Harry Anslinger thought, well, we should have a law against hemp, and so did William Randolph Hearst, and so did DuPont, and the three companies got together, and other people claimed the cotton industry joined in to outlaw hemp because it was making a huge comeback. And the reason it was making a huge comeback is that it took 200 to 300 hours to plant, harvest, and make ready for fiber, acre of hemp. But all of a sudden, in the 30s, in the 1930s, that 200 or 300 man-hours per acre went down to 1 man-hour per acre. It was a better fiber than any other fiber and previous hemp fibers. And that was the beginning of the end of all fibers, as being the only synthetic. Nylon, which is the new synthetic, would have to make way for the reintroduction of hemp as an inexpensive fiber, as well as the strongest, the best, the longest lasting, and the softest fiber. The government of the United States outlawed a fiber and forced the rest of the world to swallow it. They swallowed the outlawing of the #1 fiber on Earth for 10,000 years until the 1930s, and then they outlawed it completely.
China, the hemp country, was part of the Japanese plan for military conquest.
But in official Tokyo, seat of an empire which for nearly a decade has been governed by its stern and ruthless military caste, there is more activity, more secret comings and goings than in many a year. The little men who command the world's third largest navy see in the South Pacific the richest of all colonial prizes. The Philippines, a group of 7,091 Pacific islands which, still under the protection of the U.S. flag, constitute the only major hazard to Japanese plans for new conquest in the war year of 1940. Already one important island industry, the growing and processing of Manila hemp, is almost entirely under Japanese control. And within the past few years, by intensive cultivation, Japanese immigrant farmers have increased production of the one cash crop which has long been a virtual Philippine monopoly.
The invasion of the two big hemp-producing countries, China and Philippines, was the start of hemp rationing. Hitler was also aware of the strategic importance of hemp, which was used in the making of canvas and ropes, both of which were an essential part of his war effort. In 1941, when the German army invaded Russia, it blocked Britain's supply of Russian hemp. Germany managed to develop her own hemp production, but the cultivation of this fiber, which had become so necessary in wartime, was still banned in Great Britain. In 1942, the German troops reached the center of Russia. The land continued to produce hemp, which enabled Hitler to move confidently to the next stage of his plans for the Reich. To safeguard its own supplies of hemp, Great Britain urged India to increase production. Meanwhile, war was spreading to Japan.
Within little more than a year, Japan, successfully employing once again the deceit and treachery which had so well served her in the past, had taken the final desperate plunge.
When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, forcing the United States of America to declare war, Americans realized they were cut off from their hemp supplies. The U.S. Navy was totally dependent upon hemp for rot-resistant ropes for their ships and for many other components. The American government then decided to redevelop their hemp industry. Marijuana was legalized again and farmers received seeds. A propaganda film called Hemp for Victory was then made to encourage this war effort. The Allies' air forces were completely reliant upon hemp. Parachute straps, packs and belts were made out of hemp. No other available fiber was so strong and so reliable under combat conditions. After General MacArthur had forced the Japanese to withdraw from the Philippines, hemp production soon reached pre-war levels again. After the war years, a new world arose from the ashes of the old. India gained independence. Thanks to automation, India doubled its hemp production and increased its exports to America and the rest of the world. In peacetime,